Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to No One's a Critic podcast. We are your hosts, Mac of Macabre Storytelling and Mr. Pure Kino. How you doing tonight, my man?
I am doing well. Earlier today, I was celebrating my 50K subscriber special.
What? You hit 50? Oh,
I did, yes. I hit 50,000 subscribers. And
lovely.
to yeah, today I did a live stream which was a gabagool mukbang. I'd never eaten gabagool before, and being a Sopranos focused channel, I was like, let's save it for a special occasion. So I got about half a pound of gabagool and ate it on stream. And we just chatted, and it was really fun. And yeah, it was a good Sunday.
What is gabagool? I always thought it was like I thought it was like a slang term for like prosciutto or some shit.
It's like prosciutto. It's an Italian cured meat. It's like ham. It tastes just like ham, to be honest. I was a little bit disappointed by it, but it's like the Guido pronunciation of, like, I think it's capicola. Is like how it's written. It's not written gabagool, but the way that Italians in America kind of pronounce things, they pronounce it with like a G sound. Um, so that's it's just like it sounds funny, so that's why it's kind of really caught on with the Sopranos community, because they're always like gabagool gabagool, because it's a funny sounding word. But it's just kind of like a fatty ham, cold
Oh,
cut.
capicola?
Capicola, yeah, I think
Oh,
that's how
I
you pronounce it.
yeah, because they have that in Jimmy John's sandwiches. I know that.
Yeah. But again, the Italians pronounce it their own way.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
that was, yeah, it was fun to try for the first time. And again, it was I've no one has ever done a gabagool mukbang on YouTube. I am officially the first person to ever do that.
Fuck yeah.
So put me in the world record book, Guinness.
Congratulations, man. I didn't
Thank
even
you, thank
realize.
you.
I was like, oh yeah, fuck, hell yeah. And then
Yeah,
what are you
man.
you're up to you're up to Bug and Breaking Bad. Nice.
Yeah, Bug, and then tomorrow is the next one after that. So I'm wrapping up season 4, and then in October I'm doing Breaking Bad Tober, which is the same thing I did with Sopranos Timber, which is like the last season. I'll be releasing a new video every single day of the week. So
Nice.
finally wrapping up Breaking Bad, which would be nice.
Do you have any plans for after that?
After that, I'm gonna work on some like general kind of video essays for a while. I'm gonna take a break in January just because I have not stopped making videos like every single. I put out a video every single week for the last 2 years. I've
Oh,
never once, maybe one. I think one week I missed it, but every other week I put out at least one video. And I'm like, okay, I really need to like take a little bit of time here and relax. And this January is always the slow season of YouTube. Like, you don't get as many
mhm.
views, you don't get as much ad revenue. So I was like, let's take a month and just like kind of chill for a little bit.
It's amazing you say that because I kind of like it. That's you're probably doing the smart way because what I do is I'll have like certain bursts where I'll like release like 4 or 5 videos a month and like all like half-hour essays. I'm like, yeah, and then I'll slack and like won't release for like 3 months, and like that's how you get either or.
You're living your life the way you want to, which is, I think, the best thing about being a content creator, which is you don't have a boss breathing down your neck of like, hey, new video, we need another one coming up here. It's like, I think the freedom of doing what you want to do is the best part of YouTube, and I never wanted to feel like, oh, I have to make something at a certain time. Like, no, if I want to take a week, fuck you, I'll take a week.
It's a good point. Yeah, I feel like I probably should adopt that a little bit though, just to keep me on because I'm almost I just finished up the audio recording for the leftovers video and I'm editing. It's gonna be about 2.5 hours, and the video editing is always I'm usually that ironically that part for me is the easiest. I don't mind that part at all. Everything else blows, but
I'm the same
we'll
way.
see.
Like, I've gotten really fast at editing video. Like, I know how to do it well.
Mhm.
It's writing and recording the audio. I hate editing audio because I always think I sound
Me too.
awful. And that's the big hump. And once I get there, I'm like, oh, I'll knock out this video in a day, because editing footage is pretty simple.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm the exact same way. When I'm like recording it, like this, like I'm listening to myself, I'm like, oh, that sounds awful. I end up doing like 10 different takes. And then I listen back to it while I'm editing it and it sounds fine. And I'm like, why was I freaking out during the
Well,
during
no
the
one likes the
recording?
way they sound. I mean, a lot of people don't like the way they look, but I feel like no one likes the way they sound.
Yeah, good point. It's always like that. Or like when the worst is when you hear it played back to you, you're like,
Oh
ugh,
God, you're like, ugh.
disgusting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like later in the week, we're probably going to talk about House of the Dragon. But today we were thinking just to touch upon it. There was the recent release of the Little Mermaid
Mhm.
teaser trailer. What were your thoughts, Kino?
So I haven't actually seen the trailer itself, and I don't really care to because I'm not like I don't give a shit about the Disney live action remakes at all. They do nothing for me. But I'm aware of the controversy surrounding the casting, as I'm sure you are as well. It's the latest thing going on the internet.
Yes, unfortunately. So yeah, it's not like it's like a teaser trailer, so it just shows Haley Berry's look, or is it Haley Berry? I'm not sure. I know it sounds very similar to Halle Berry, but it shows her look and the aesthetic, and she's singing the song. It doesn't show too much. Um, I think she looks fine. However, I will say, and this isn't against her. Isn't even against like the movie in general. But I don't know what it is. But there has been a weird trend where movies I almost feel like they think that like turning down the color saturation of your movie makes it like look more realistic.
Yeah,
I it's like in the teaser trailer, you can tell like she has red hair, but it like the color saturation is turned down like
yeah.
super low, and I'm like, what is this? What this looks so bad? What? And I've seen that with a lot of more recent movies. Like they're
Well,
almost like
it's
afraid
the
of like
Nolan
vibrant
effect.
colors.
It's the same thing we talked about with like the Dark Knight, basically, and its influence on Hollywood, which is everything's got to be gritty, everything's got to be dark, and that's I think it looks. I don't like that, and I don't like that visual trend in Hollywood. I'm really ready for more kind of vibrant, productions. Kind of more of a throwback to the classic era of Hollywood when they first, were doing color film. They were making those things like look like rainbows, and I think
Those
that's
were
awesome. Like
awesome.
Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, all that kind of stuff.
Funny enough that you say that. I went to see this past winter. I went to see West Side Story.
Mm,
Me and my mother and sister have a tradition. We all go to the movies on Christmas,
yeah,
and we saw West Side Story. And if you watch the original film version, it was like the colors were popping, like it was like very saturation turned up. It
yeah,
looked fucking awesome. This movie, and the irony is like, oh, we wanted to give it that old school look, and it's like you made it look like shit. To be
yeah,
honest, you made it look like it's all washed out, and
yeah,
you can't even. It all looks kind of like grayish and like
yeah.
dark bluish. It's like, what are you doing? Stop it.
No, I mean, if you want to make it look like that, make it a film noir, without any color. Which I'd
Exactly.
love to see more of those too, because I feel like the few films that have done black and white, they've not really done it well. Like the classic film noir is not just black and white, but really striking shadows and like high contrast between the light and the dark. And I feel like most films like that are black and white just put like a black and white filter on it, and it doesn't look anything like the classic black and white films do.
That's such an excellent point. There are a lot of movies where yeah, it'll be like, oh, we have the black and white version, or like, oh, it's a black and white. But you're not like taking full advantage of the entire point of black and white, or I shouldn't say the entire point, but like what you were saying, like film noir was to really emphasize, like the shadows and like like in contrast, really use those to like really accentuate the film. Whereas most days, like most black and white films made even nowadays, they think they're being artistic by doing it. But then I watch it and it's just like you didn't. Yes, you this film is black and white, but it's not shot like a black and white film. If that makes sense. I think you understand what I'm
No,
saying.
they're
But
putting the effort on the computer people who touch up the film afterwards versus the director when he's actually filming the original footage, actually paying attention to lighting and creating that dramatic effect there. Not to say that the lighting people don't know what they're doing. They do light it for film, but they're not lighting for like a visual style. They're just lighting to get the shot. And again, relying on post production. That's the big trend in Hollywood that I really hate, is that like everything about the movie pretty much happens on computers afterwards, versus the magic's supposed to happen before you hit the film button and start rolling. So
mhm.
I think that's just a horrible trend in Hollywood, and I understand it's cheaper, but I hope we can go back to a more authentic kind of filmmaking experience.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I'm looking at your out because I was on your channel checking
Yeah.
out the your 50K, and I'm looking at the thumbnails for
Mm.
the show. What's so interesting is that both Breaking Bad and Mad Men are shows that really emphasized color. Like they
Yeah.
used color very, very purposefully. I would Mad Men I'm less familiar with, but I know Breaking Bad.
Oh
The
yeah.
color was massively
Hmm.
important to that show, and like everything popped. The blue sky, anytime Walt's shirts, like just all the little things, it was very, very pronounced.
Yeah.
Funny enough, too, in Sopranos, what I noticed is because I work at a bar on Fridays around the corner from my house, and every night every time I leave, it's like 9 o'clock, so I'm like, I don't want to cook. So I pick up some food and I come back, and I'm usually like a little drunk. So I'll throw on an episode of The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Something I noticed from watching it too is that The Sopranos in its early seasons was very similar. The
Hmm.
colors were very pronounced. It was
Yeah.
very vibrant.
Yeah.
But as the show, and this is using it purposefully.
Yeah.
As the show went on, it got a lot more muted. The
Yeah.
colors stopped being more, but that was done on purpose.
Yeah.
That was done to like sort of mimic the idea of things becoming either what depression or things becoming more gray or just
Yeah.
drab, like life starting to sort of like lose its sheen, or the lifestyle,
Well,
if you will.
I just released a video on 9/11, talking about the effect that 9/11 had on the
Oh,
show, and that's definitely a part of it, which is America became darker after that
hmm.
event. People were less trusting, more suspicious. It's reflected in the characters, and that's also really reflected in the cinematography of the show. I think
Oh,
it's
I gotta
done, but
watch
you're
that
like you said,
one.
very intentionally.
That it was just funny when you said that, like, because I didn't know you were where you were going with it. So you were just like, I made a video about 9/11, and I was like, wait, what? And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, surprise, okay.
Well, I think it's a really important part of the show, and it's actually, that video is funny because
Absolutely.
it was one of the original videos I wanted to do back in the day, and I just never got around to doing it. And finally, I was like, oh wait, September 11th is coming around. Let's it's 21st anniversary, perfect time to make the video. But it was really difficult because I was deep into like making the Breaking Bad logs. I'm still like every single day trying to get them ready for October because they're gonna come out day after day. I have to make them like way in advance.
Hmm.
And so I was like, shit, and I gotta make another video essay on top of this. And I think as a result, the video did not come out like the way I wanted it to. I think I would have liked another pass through of writing to really like get those. I don't think I even mentioned the color scheme, which I should have. But it was just a matter of like I got to get this video out for September 11th because it's a perfect day to release it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it was funny on I think on my first watch of The Sopranos, that kind of went over my head, especially in the last season. The how it compare like sort of transition to talking about like the war on terror,
Hmm.
whether it was AJ looking into conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
the FBI like sort of like reeling back on organized crime to
Hmm.
deal with terror threats, and then there was that whole subplot with the two, I think it was um, the two Middle Eastern guys who
Yeah.
like wanted to work with Chris, and then that
Yeah.
became a whole thing.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking when I first watched my first watcher, I was like, I don't. Is this going anywhere? Like, what is this about?
Hmm.
And now, upon subsequent rewatches, I understand the significance and
Yeah.
what David Chase was trying to say.
There was a lot of like Bush era politics in there too. The fact that Tony was kind of ratting on these guys, but it wasn't very clear whether they were even terrorists or not. And the same kind of questions of like Iraq were like, were they even involved? Did they have WMDs? There's a whole political thing there that I think like loses some of its meaning in the post. Like, we moved on from the Bush era and we don't think about it as much anymore. But I
Absolutely.
think it was absolutely critical to the way they wrote it. I mean, all these guys lived in New York during 9/11. Steve Buscemi volunteered as a firefighter during the
Yeah.
attacks, which I also didn't mention in the video, and I should have. But again, fuck me.
Well, it's funny because just to kind of touch upon that, actually, just to bring it back, unless you guys could not tell, we were because I brought up the subject of the Little Mermaid trailer to Kino, and he was the one who was smart and was like, there's not because like there really is not much to talk about it. We kind of already did an episode on the Black James Bond, and Kino he was correct where he was like, we I think we kind of like put our feelings about it out there already. You probably everyone who's watching this probably would kind of like know what our position is on it, which is we really don't give a shit. We're kind of like if it's a good movie, it's a good movie. Who cares about the race? Like it's
I mean, there
uh,
is something I think. I mean, right? We both agree on that. I don't give a shit if the Little Mermaid's black. It doesn't matter. I'm not gonna watch the movie regardless, just because I don't watch Disney corporate bullshit. But I will say there is something to this where I'm like, I don't care that they cast a previously like they cast a black person for a previously white role. That doesn't really bother me because they cast different people for different roles all the time. I do think maybe there is an over representation of like African American people for these kind of recastings when there's a lot of other ethnicities out there that could you know fit into these roles: Asian, Latina, Middle Eastern, Indian.
it's a good point.
There's a lot of different groups, and it seems like in American media in particular, black people are getting a lot of these kind of recasts. Again, not to say that they should, not to say that black people can't be incredible actors, but if we are going to go down to diversity train, I'd like to see more than just the typical kind of depictions that we've seen in mainstream American media for the past 10 years.
Absolutely. I think that is sort of a blind spot when it comes to a lot of when we're talking about like racial topics, especially in the US. I think we usually ironically that not like it's very like sort of irony, it's very black and white, like both figuratively and it's like figuratively
Yeah,
and literally. Like when we
yeah.
when we're talking about race, we're usually, and I understand why. Like obviously,
Mhm.
like given a lot of the issues, I understand why that is the main focus. But it is a good point that when I think even the Oscars have gotten shit about this, where like they'll make a big deal out of like representation, but that usually only applies to either black or African American actors. But then when it comes to Asian or Latino representation or Middle Eastern representation, it kind of gets they're
Yeah.
like it's almost like, oh yeah, the Asians are like whatever. No, that's a good point. I would love to see
Mhm.
that. Fuck it, just go for it.
Yeah, and I feel like we're getting there slowly. It's like you do see more. Again, there was the I think it was Miss Marvel show that was a Middle Eastern actress was playing her. Like there's more and more coming down the pipeline, but it feels like it's been primarily led by African American casting. And again, nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with the performances that they've done. But I think we should be more inclusive overall. And also, you know, I don't want to be deaf to people being offended by some like recasting white roles. People have brought that up during our James Bond discussion, which we both kind of said it didn't matter whether James Bond was white or black, but there were British people in that comment section saying like, no, this James Bond, it really is like an icon to our um heritage and our kind of national identity. And I there's this big thing in media where people kind of dismiss that, where it's like, oh, they're just white people being racist, and it's like, no, that could be true. That could be like maybe for British people this is a really big thing, and as a result, maybe he should be a white actor. I think in general in the past, that kind of reasoning has not extended, vice versa. I saw a funny meme that was like, it showed a bunch of characters who are like different races. Like Scarlet Witch is supposed to be Romanian. She's played by a white actress. The Tibetan lady from Avengers or whatever was played by a white actress, and like all of those were okay. But then when Little Mermaid came around, people were freaking out. So it happens the other way too. But I'm not tone deaf to kind of white identity and wanting characters to represent that.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that because there was another meme where they were talking about like one of the big jokes that they talk like I see online a lot is like, oh, what's next? Is Ryan Gosling gonna play Martin Luther King Jr.? First of all, I would definitely
I would like to
watch
see
that.
that. That'd be
I
fun.
would if any studio produces that, fuck it, I'm just going to watch it. He's like smoldering, like given like no. But what always pisses me off about those memes is that they always use historical figures.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you're missing, like, you're defeating your own point.
Yeah.
The entire point of if we're talking about, like, obviously, if we're making a film about John F. Kennedy, we're not gonna cast Chiwetel Ejiofor, like, obviously. But when we're talking about traditionally fictional characters who are white, that's when it starts to get a little bit okay. Now we're into because at least our argument with James Bond was that is there anything in the narrative
Hmm.
that like if we were to take say the James Bond the Daniel Craig saga or even
Hmm.
the Pierce Brosnan saga, so like the last 25 years of James Bond films, if it were a black man in that role in those movies, would
Yeah.
anything change? And if the answer is no, it's like okay, well, now it's getting into a weird because
Hmm.
I agree with you about like, that's I read a couple of those comments about British culture and whatnot, but then it kind of gets into the weird discussion of well, what are you saying? Are you saying that Britain's that like being white is like inherent to British, and then and then that
Well,
starts a whole
maybe
other
maybe it is
conversation.
for Britain. They are like the cultural people who were there before anyone. I don't think that argument necessarily applies to America because this was not a land originally, founded by white people. There were people here before them, and that's a whole can of worms there. But maybe for England, yeah, the people who were there from the beginning were white, and maybe that is now. There's a bunch of different groups of people there. Um, but I don't want to be dismissive of like any kind of like national pride or identity is like racism or it's like bigotry. Like I think there is room for discussion there, and I want to be open to that because I think mainstream the liberal mainstream media is not like open to that idea. They're not open to that discussion at all, and I think that's why it offends a lot of people like casting like this. It's just because I don't think that many people care about the Little Mermaid that much, but they see it as kind of like, oh, another kind of attack on our identity. And I hope that's not what Hollywood is trying to do, but I think they are intentionally kind of fanning the flames a little bit, hoping to generate some controversy that will again sell tickets to their movie a little bit more.
Oh, I'm sure absolutely they are. But the issue is then like the people who are the last voices against it are it's like it's funny. I saw a meme about it. They're talking about like the quartering or nerdrotic or like any of those like shitty YouTubers. They're like they're just doing this to generate outrage, and it's like then why are you rising to the bait? Like
Yeah,
you're the ones who are making like you're the ones who made like 50 videos on Brie Larson and Captain
yeah.
Marvel, man. Like you're kind of like you're also kind of like you're kind of playing into it a little bit. Like
It's
I mean, hey, you're making your bag too, but
mhm. It's very much both sides. It's like I really hate we talked about this before. The polarization of all online discussion. It's not healthy, and I think the vast majority of us could come in the middle and like you know acknowledge that yeah, a lot of this casting is politically driven. It's very much like it is a part of the marketing department's thinking. But that doesn't mean there is not room for different actors of different backgrounds to play these roles. I don't think there's anything wrong with this girl in this trailer. Like she looks cute. The Little Mermaid's supposed to be cute. I don't really see there's anything wrong with this. but I do think there is a discussion to be had about, what what goes into the motivations behind these things.
Well, the issue now, and we talked about this before too. The issue now is that the like a lot of people have been pointing out like how it's like here's an example of 20 years ago there was a race swap of a character and no one or like there wasn't a big hubbub but no
Yeah,
one cared. Now obviously like there's like social media wasn't as big and yada
yeah,
yada yada. But the main reason I think, or someone put it well, is that it really isn't the problem. It's a symptom of it's or like the outrage toward it is a byproduct of something else going on, which is sort
hmm
of like this the war on wokeness or like
yeah,
liberal ideology infecting me and all that stuff. And the issue now is that, and this is what really sucks about this whole thing, is that even if I think it's Haley, I should look that up. I think it's Haley Berry, the actress who's playing the Little Mermaid. What upsets me is that like people start to judge the film before it comes out, because she could have been the best actress for the role. She could have been
hmm
like head and shoulders above everyone else for the role, from singing, from acting. She could have been
hmm
perfect, and the casting directors could have been like, you know what, we're just gonna give her the role because that she deserves it, and that's like
hmm
she's the best person for the job.
yeah,
But now, because of all this bullshit, every time a person of color is cast, not even sometimes not even in like just race swap, but just like every time, like many times when just POC just show up in media in general,
yeah.
especially with like these high, like whether Star Wars or like Lord of the Rings, whatever. It's almost like there's a certain assertion by by fans that like, well, they're only there because of like diversity quotas. Like
Yeah.
obviously, like there was a white actor better for that role, but like, well, you got to get the diversity quota. And the problem is that like you have no idea what the casting process is. You have no idea, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, this is like a you. It's basically Pandora's box has been opened, and we
Yeah.
can't stuff it back in the box. And now everything, that's why all these conversations just fucking blow because it's
Well, I mean, there's some truth to what they're saying there, because if you look at House of the Dragon, which again had the same kind of controversy, the directors or the creators came out and said, yeah, we cast House Valerian as black because we didn't want all the cast to be white. Um, Now, you could argue for or against that sentiment. There are people who are like, yeah, that's a good thing. We should strive to have not like every single character on the show be white. The majority of the cast is still white. So, the kind of argument is like you're mad about one character when 99% of them are still white. So there's an argument for and against that, but it is absolutely, part of the discussion that, yeah, they were going to cast a black character just no matter what. Now, again, not to shit on the actor. I'm sure they're fantastic. I'm sure they're great for the role. The guy who plays Corlys Valerian. I mean, he hasn't been in every single episode of House of the Dragon so far, but from what we've seen of him, seems competent, as competent as any of the other actors on the show. So, no, not talking shit on him. I'm sure he's fantastic, but this is a truth in media.
no, but I'm talking about like specifically when it's not when that's like if when the studios do this shit when they like suck their own cocks about it, that's obnoxious. But what I'm talking about is when it's like, so for example, a perfect example was Zoe Kravitz and Jeffrey Wright in the Batman
Yeah.
film. Those were race drops, and it just like I don't remember. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't think anyone was like, yeah, we needed to make them black to change things up. Like no, they were just they were perfect for those roles.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're still going to get people. It's like, well, obviously Zoe was cast because they had to make a statement, and it's like, well, no. Again, if like this, if the creators come out and like start sucking their own, like that was the whole frustration with like Disney and like the first openly gay character. It wasn't that well, first of all, the representation was bad, but the problem wasn't having a gay character. The problem was that Disney like literally sucked themselves off in the
Yeah.
media about it, and they were like, "This is going to be revolutionary,"
Yeah.
and then it was like a huge letdown.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to something like the Batman, where they're just, hey, no, these were just the best actors for the role. There's because of the landscape, there's always going to be that
Yeah.
like tension of people being like, oh, but like, come on, we know why they really did it. And it's
Yeah.
like, and now it just sort of like ruins discourse about it.
Yeah, it's definitely the times we live in, and there were recastings of different races back in the day. I think the original Batman movie that came out, Harvey Dent is played by
Oh yeah,
Billy
Billy
D.
D. Williams.
Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no one bat an eye. Then again, it was a very small role. He wasn't Two Face. That would it would later go to Tommy Lee Jones in the sequel to it. But again, no one batted an eye because it was a different time. There wasn't this kind of charged political environment affecting every bit of media. Um, and we've discussed this before, but I absolutely hate it, and I try to avoid it within my content just because it's not fun for me to argue this stuff. I mean, it's fun for me to discuss it with you because we're both rational people, but um like I got shit on in one of the videos I released because I talked about toxic masculinity in Breaking Bad. Just kind of offhandedly mentioned it. I think it is absolutely a part of the narrative, and I needed to address it, to be honest, as a critic. But yeah, people were giving me shit for it,
Oh wait,
saying I'd sold out to the liberals,
which
call me a
one?
soy boy. Cornered, the episode where he does the "I am the danger" speech.
Oh, I gotta watch that. Is it
Yeah.
like,
Go look in the comments, dude. People were like it was so funny too because there was like no self-awareness that the people who were against that term were like, you used an offensive term, you should have used, toxic entitlement, or there's something else. He's like, your word like triggers people. And I was like, do you have so little self-awareness to realize that you're reacting the same way that you say that liberals react to, like, trigger warnings and SJWs and shit? It's like, it was so funny to react. I knew I was going to get that reaction. I knew it before I even uploaded it, but man, some people have no sense at all.
it's just so annoying. That's why even my dating and body transformation videos, those videos are all, I think I may have mentioned this in the Breaking Bad episode we did. Those videos are all about toxic masculinity. But I knew that if I said that term, people would be like, blah, 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 like
Yeah.
woke. It's like, bro, it's
Yeah.
just, and it sucks because, and some part it is because of like, there are like idiots out there who were like, toxic masculinity is when like man does something bad, and it's like, shut the fuck up. Like, no, it's not. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So shut up, because when you're an idiot, it gives the other idiots an evidence to point to. So when
Yeah.
you and me try to be reasonable, all they have to do is like, yeah, but that idiot said it, and we're
Mm-hmm.
like, and you and me are like, I know we're not with them. Please don't group us in with that person. That person's a fucking moron too.
And again, people were commenting like, I've agreed with every single thing you've said up until now, but I'm going to unsubscribe. And I'm like, bro, literally, are you like, one single thing I say that you don't like, you're like off the train? It's like, I mean, more power to you. I don't give a shit whether you unsubscribe or watch my videos, but
Oh my god, I'm reading the comments now. They are triggered.
people want to put you in a camp, right? They want to put a label on you, which is like, if you're woke, you believe in every single thing the woke people believe in, and if you're, based, if you're red pilled, whatever, that you believe every single thing on our side. And it's like, if you disagree with any single aspect of this, you're in the other side and you're my enemy. And it's so fucking stupid. Like, not everyone in my comment section was like that. There were plenty of people being like, you guys are being fucking stupid about this. But man, oh man, you're right. Did I trigger some people?
Oh my god, like guys, come on.
I know.
Lay off
Overshadowed
the
everything
soy.
else about that video.
It's just, well, that's what happens. Is like that's the irony of that term is that the guys who get triggered by it is that they'll look at you and they'll like yell at you. It's like, oh, I bet you're an easily offended soy boy cuck, and
Yeah.
it's like, you're the one. Like, again, you're the one who's like,
Yeah.
and that's what's frustrating too. Even if you, and I'm like, I haven't watched a video, but I'm confident that like, I am confident that you are using it in the proper context. You're not just saying it like, you're actually like, hey, this is what the term means. This is how it applies. I'm not saying that like he's just a man, and it's just, and they still, but once they hear it, they start typing away, and it's like, oh my god, please stop.
I mean, it's the same thing too. Also, like on the liberal side, which is people crying about oppression and like fascism, but literally trying to like censor people's speech and stuff. And it's like no self
I
awareness that you're literally doing the exact same. Like the whole intolerance cannot be tolerated. The South Park joke from that episode. There are people who use that unironically. I've seen it on Reddit, being like, intolerance cannot be tolerated. We had to censor and get rid of all of that. And people were like pointing it out, and they're like, no, I 100% believe this. Like, it's dangerous to let people talk like this. And it's like,
well,
again, no
it's
self-awareness at all.
yeah. Like, what's unfortunate about that is because it is correct to an extent. Obviously, like if someone is like on Twitter calling for like going on like raging like ethno state like calls to action, it's like at some point we have to be like, okay. But the problem is that at some point the term fascism, and and like that's what's frustrating is I agree and like, okay, yeah, I can see elements of it in like in this particular context in this particular person, but it got so, what's the word I'm looking for, it got so like hip, or it got so like trendy that people just throw that out just like so willy nilly, and it's like, guys, you like, and half of those people can't even tell you what fascism is. Like they have no idea of the context, they have no idea like where it comes from, and like or other regimes that have implemented it. And it's just like, guys, the problem with these people is because every time we actually try to have like a conversation about this and discuss it, we have to disavow you. We have to like give like a disclaimer, like, hey, by the way, we're not associated with these fucking morons you see on Twitter or YouTube who are like throwing this word out willy nilly. So please, because we try to have a conversation about it, and then you end up having to disavow every single person who has ever said something stupid, and you're like you can't even have the conversation at that point.
Well, again, Twitter again is one of these spaces where you are encouraged to be extremely reactionary, encouraged to say extreme things to cut through the noise. That's why even celebrities will say something, very, provocative to get like a million kind of comments and reactions and stuff. Um, everyone plays this game, and it's a dangerous one. I think it really ruins discourse. It makes social media not fun. And again, I try to like encourage in my community, like, you can talk shit, you can shit post, you can do whatever, but we're operating on this understanding that we're all friends here, and it's like, even if we have disagreements, like, keep it nice. I had some people arguing politics in my Discord, and I had to like delete the messages and be like, chill, guys. Just because, you know, it makes it not fun to be a part of that community.
I think that's sort of what has ruined part of, whether it's like shit posting or just like just talking about media in general. There are always like this handful of people who just take it too far, who like take things too personally, who just try to, or like they, or we actually, funny enough, we actually had a situation like this in my Discord where, so like in my Discord, we shit post all the time. We're having fun, and we like get like edgy memes, edgy humor, whatever. But then there was this one time we had someone in who they were like posting stuff like that, but everyone had like a weird feeling about it. It was kind of like this thing where, again, that sort of humor, like the edgy humor, like the shit posting, that works. That only really works when everyone is in on the joke. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of like the entire joke of it is that, we all know this isn't serious.
Yeah.
But the moment you get someone where you have even an inkling of maybe they kind of think it, or
Yeah.
like they're kind of like, or they're laughing about it like in the wrong way, like, haha, yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
hold on. Let's not, because you don't want to perpetuate it, because you don't
Yeah.
want to embolden this person. And it's just, like, why did you ruin it? You're the
Yeah.
one you're ruining the fun, bro.
I really don't like to censor my Discord in any way. I like, there's people who say things I don't agree with. Like there was when the Queen of England died, I was getting kind of a little upset because there was a lot of people like being disrespectful to her on the Discord, and like they didn't like her. And I'm someone who's like, you should respect the dead, you should respect the elderly. And but I also I didn't want to like censor them or anything just because it didn't reach the point where it was like personal attacks on people. That's the point I kind of draw the line at. But I'm like, if people have different opinions, you know, it's fine. It should be encouraged. But I just don't like this, personally.
Well, that's sort of that's the thing. It's like I made plenty of Queen memes and jokes, but there's a difference between like okay, I can kind of tell when like you're making jokes because like there, I mean, like, I don't know anyone who makes more 9/11 jokes or memes than Americans.
Yeah,
Like when I'm on Twitter, like they're just like going for it, like all the time. Even not even on 9/11, just going
yeah,
for it whenever.
yeah,
There is, but yeah, the entire point of like like the post meta ironic aspect of it is that there is this like underlying assertion that we all kind of know. Okay, we're all having fun here. We're all
yeah,
kind of no one's actually like kind of like yeah, actually and again, yeah, the moment you feel that in a community, whether you're talking about a movie, TV show, whatever, the moment it like goes into that direction, it just all the fun's gone because now it's
yeah,
just okay. Now you have, and then especially like you, if you're like running the Discord, you have to step in and like you don't want to have to do that. You don't want to
mm,
have to be like Big Brother and be like, but at the same time, you know that like these idiots are going to like it's going to be like these two idiots who are going to like cause a huge issue and make everyone uncomfortable. And so you're like, oh, what the fuck? What do we do now?
yeah.
And yeah.
I'm calling this right now because I've been pretty good on the prediction on this podcast. I think the left is going to come after the Sopranos one day. Just because
Oh, I don't think so.
there's this big association with like the right in the Sopranos community. Just because the characters on there are very much on the right, which is ironic. That's a whole discussion in of itself because the writers are very much like on the left. Like you can tell David Chase and all these people kind of believe the opposite of what a lot of the mobsters are saying. But there's the whole Donald Trump connection in the show and like Bush and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the liberals will eventually come and be like, this is a racist show, and they're
Well,
gonna try to cancel it.
I don't think the left will. I don't think like liberals in general because I think most people. It's the same thing with like I don't know. Did you see that? I think I tweeted it. There was like one of those like masculinity grifter accounts and they tweeted the scene where Gus is he brings Walt into the lab to try to convince him to cook,
Yeah,
and he's like, a man provides
yeah,
for his family. And this like masculinity grifter account, I'll have to find it and send it to you. He was like, man, yeah, man, Breaking Bad was like the last non-soy show
yeah,
on TV, and of course, everyone in the comments is like, what is like the entire point of that scene is that Gus is like he's playing on his
yeah.
insecurities. That's like that was the entire irony of it was that he's saying this, but what he's really doing is like because he knows Walt's like a little bitch, so he's like, I know this will get you to like manipulate you.
But that's
Um,
exactly why I think the woke crowd is going to go after it because you have people in that community who are pushing
oh,
that. You have people in the Sopranos community who are pushing the same thing. They're like, whenever Tony talks something about gay people or liberals or whatever, people quote that and they're like, he can't be here in our social club no more. And then I think the woke people are going to see that and be like, the Sopranos hates gay. Like the Sopranos show is
oh,
anti, LGBTQ, and they're gonna go after it like that. I think we'll see that in our lifetimes
I
because
don't.
I've seen Twitter accounts where they do mention stuff like that. Like they compare Donald Trump to Tony Soprano. They call Breaking Bad like a male power fantasy show. And again, not that the shows are those things, but you have the idiots who think they are kind of like carrying the show as like flag like poles. And I think it's going to draw the attention and get some controversy there.
Well, I think okay. So now that you said, I don't think like the left or liberals will. I think like the hyper woke people will. Like those are the people who are
That's what I
just
mean. Yeah.
yeah. I just want to because like left or liberals will like no, you're clearly like reading The Sopranos wrong. Like
Yeah.
you clearly And like it's so funny because it's not even like subtle. Like he's a like mama's boy with like
Yeah.
anxiety issues. Like he's like it's very very clear.
But again, most of the
Um,
people who will criticize it probably haven't even watched it.
well, that's and the people who like think it's like, oh, he's based. It's like you clearly did not understand the show
Yeah, they didn't
whatsoever.
understand. You either didn't watch it or you didn't understand it.
Another, I know I always bring up this scene. I'm sure you're sick of me. Another scene that I actually saw people defending it. I had one person defend the scene where he beats up Perry in season 6.
Mm.
And the person said, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like, but like he had to establish dominance. He had to show his followers or like the crew that he was still the boss. And it's just like if you watch the scene and everything that happens after, that was the worst thing to because it made him seem unhinged. After that, all of his like capos, they started to like question his leadership, and like eventually half of them became like started like ratting because that it wasn't a display of strength what
Mm.
Tony thought it was. It was a display of okay, Tony's kind of like getting like fucking weird, and like we don't like we
I
don't think that he's like we don't trust him to like we fear him, but we don't respect him. I guess is the right way
I
to put
you've
it.
talked about that scene a lot, and I've actually sometimes brought this up, which is I don't 100% agree with what you said there because there's a scene right not right after that, but there's a scene later in an episode where Christopher at the beginning was questioning Tony's decision to help Johnny Sack whack Rusty Millio. He's like, sounds like a pussy move to me, to just do what Johnny Sack says. And then later after he does it, Christopher comes back and is like, Tony, I thought about it, and I think that idea is a good idea after all. So it
But
did work in a sense, but I
well,
agree
that's
with the sentiment.
yeah.
And there's also other scenes later which are kind of like that too. There's a scene in Chasing It when Tony is like yelling at fucking the guy who rats, Carlo.
Hmm.
And it's like, maybe you should suck cock or whatever. And it's like, he didn't have to do this, but it pushed Carlo away and made him more likely to like, yeah, fuck Tony, I'm gonna rat. So I agree with the sentiment, but I think
Yeah.
there is some nuance there.
Well, it was funny because there's a line in A Bronx Tale with Robert De Niro, a great line where it's the movie is the kid he idolizes Chaz Palminteri, who's the gangster, and his father Robert De Niro is like the straight man, he's the bus driver. And there's a great line where he says, the kid's like, yeah, the whole neighborhood respects him, and Robert De Niro says, no, they don't respect him, they fear him. And I think a big issue, funny enough, going back to like masculinity, I think I've noticed that with like a lot of like younger dudes, they kind of don't understand the distinction between the two, and that even kind of even shows its head in not so much Breaking Bad actually, but like a lot of people kind of like they misrepresent respect and fear, and like that was a consistent thing in The Sopranos where Tony thought that he had respect, like he was the top dog, and it's like Tony, everyone like you're just. I think Melfi calls him out for it. It's like you just use the threat of force to get everything you want. They don't respect you. And while it works in the short term, you're right with Christopher, it works in the short term. In the long run, it's because it's going to plant the seeds of discontent, if you
I
will.
think they do respect him to an extent, and they fear him to an extent, and they hate him to an extent. I think it
Mm.
was a very complicated relationship he had with all those guys. There's guys like Paulie who genuinely love Tony. Like we can see even outside of like when he's alone, putting up a picture of Tony in his house, not out of fear, out of anything, just because he genuinely loved this man and looked up to him. But also was cool with like Johnny Sack killing him and him taking over. They have a very criminals have a very complicated relationship where Christopher loved Tony and hated him, like resented, like kind of like a father. I've always described a relationship like father and son, which is like you love your dad and you also kind of hate him too. Like I don't know if you have the same kind of way, but it's like I love my dad, I respect him, and there's times where I'm like I kind of want to kill you just because there's this whole kind of father and son resentment there. But I think it's very complicated. And I think what you said is absolutely a part of it. And that's why it's such a difficult show for people to understand because it's not just one way, it's every single way. Every single emotion that could be assigned to these scenes can and is a part of them.
One of my favorite. I'm just thinking of it because I always thought this was so brilliant. one of my favorite scenes is the scene in the season 5 finale. It's the scene where Tony goes into the birthday party, and he basically, it's like he's laying down the law, saying like, "Listen, I'm not going to give Tony B up to Johnny Sack
Yeah.
and Phil. I'm not going to do it." Now, obviously, we find out right after that scene is that Silvio calls him on it. It's like, look, you're not really doing this because you have principles. You just
No.
don't want to like be John's little bitch. But what I love about that scene is because when Tony is giving the speech, it almost the writing almost like falls into a trap because you kind of buy into it.
Yeah.
James Gandolfini's so good in that scene that even though we know he's being hypocritical, you kind of like get swept up in it. Like you kind of like, oh yeah, we're a family, we protect each other, and I'm like, yeah, all right. But my favorite moment is right at the end after he leaves, and then Patsy just goes, "Wow, that was great," like he
Yeah.
like mockingly, and
Yeah.
I was like, that is so like that was, and that just goes to show like how in tune they were
Yeah.
of like, because they never got, there were times like that, like that's one scene where I could see people like taking that clip and it's like, yeah man, look, he's sigma male, he's like alpha respect and integrity, and then because I could see people misinterpreting that
Yeah.
scene. But then with the Patsy line, you're like, oh, okay, no, the writers know exactly what they're trying to say with this scene.
Well, it's
God,
like
good.
being a leader is difficult, man. It's like there is no one right way. Like you gotta sometimes inspire some fear, even illogically, in order to keep people in line. Like I've been in leadership roles, in my fraternity and other kind of stuff, and it's not like sometimes you want to be cool and be everyone's friend, and you see people like kind of taking advantage of that, and you gotta lay down the law. And the whole like love versus fear thing, that's Machiavelli talks about that, which is being a leader is hard. There's no one right way, and Junior talks about this too. He's like, you steer the ship the best way you know how. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes you hit the rocks, and you take your pleasures where you can. Like there's no formula for success with that. So I again, that's the nuance I buy of the Sopranos, which is I don't completely hate Tony or disagree with everything he did. I kind of feel that way about Walter White. I kind of like disagree with everything he did on that show, but with Tony, I'm like, yeah, I get why you made these decisions. They suck, but what other choice did you have?
It's funny that you say that because I think as time has gone on, I think like obviously like there are still like the hardcore fanboys who were like Walter, yeah, but like those are like, again, those are the same guys like complaining about toxic masculinity on your video. Like I actually think that like as time has gone on, because I used to hear that about like it used to be that like, yeah, Tony Soprano was the real evil guy, but Walter White is like, he's like sympathetic and like he has like understandable motivations and he's just like a man who's like locked in his own existence. But the more I watch the shows and like revisit them and rethink them, I actually think it's the opposite, where I actually in many ways feel worse for Tony to some extent because
Oh,
when you,
I'm glad you brought that up. I 100% agree.
yeah, it's because with Tony, like, and again, not defending him,
Yeah,
but when you consider like, because like you have to consider the culture, you have to consider the environment, you have to consider his influences, his father, his uncle, his all of his friends. It's like, and again, the entire series is about this guy where his subconscious is screaming at him to, you need to get out of this,
yeah,
like you need to leave. This is going, you are, this is going to kill you one way or another, and his subconscious knows that on some level, and it's like screaming at him to stop, or you're going to lose your family. But everything in his life just is just so, it's like a bunch of gears turning him
yeah.
in one direction, and he has to, and every step of the way, even when he has like little moments where you think he's going to jump out of it, um, he backslides and backslides and backslides. But with Walter White, it's like you know exactly what you're doing. Like
Yeah.
every chance you're given an out, you say like, no, no,
That's
no,
that's
no, no.
really
I
the
like this.
difference between Walt and Tony, which is Walt loved being in that life. He loved every single aspect of it, even when it was hurting everyone around him. Tony really did not like being there subconsciously. You feel that sympathy from him in a way that I don't feel for Walt. Again, both are very well written shows, very entertaining shows, but Tony has my sympathy and my understanding in a way that Walter White never will.
That's
I
a good
really
point.
relate to Tony and his struggles in a lot of ways. Tony's speech about like when he sees a happy guy with a carefree mind, he wants to go smash his face in, and you're like that's kind of horrible. But I've been at points in my life where when I see people doing really well, I'm like, fuck you, like really, like why are you so happy and I'm not?
I literally I literally just watched a Happy Wanderer last night when I was eating my buffalo wing. Oh no, it was sorry, Friday night when I was eating my buffalo wings, and it was like, and like, yeah, you have Davey. I'm just having some bad luck, Tony. It's like, and his life is like ruined, and he's still like, hey, things are cool, and Tony's
Yeah.
like, you motherfucker.
It's again, yeah. I mean, it's such a relatable show. They it's a little bit more of a nuanced show than Breaking Bad is too. Like I really feel comfortable admitting that. Like I love Breaking Bad. I think it's one of the most entertaining shows of all time. Extremely well written, but the emotions on The Sopranos I think are much more nuanced than the kind you see on Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad's a simpler show for better and worse. I think the
Mhm.
pacing is better than The Sopranos in terms of storytelling, but the character and the emotions are more complicated and more nuanced on The Sopranos.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I hope that like it is funny. Like it's just been like the last couple of years where I've seen the tides turn against Walter, where everyone's like again, like people were kind of like on the fence talking about like, well, yeah, but he does awful things, but like he was forced and like he had no other choice. But then like things have like turned where they're kind of like, no, actually, he's just a piece. He's a terrible.
I
He's a
think
piece of
some of
shit.
that comes from Better Call Saul because with Better Call Saul, you get a character who like
That's a great point.
was forced,
Yes.
not for it wasn't forced. He chose to go into it, but he chose to go into it for like sympathetic reasons, and like you can sympathize with him much more than like after watching Better Call Saul, you're like, God damn, Walter's a piece of shit. Like Jimmy's kind of a piece of shit, but he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He doesn't want to make life bad for anyone. It just kind of happens. Walt actively wants to hurt some people and like damage his family. And again, wonderfully written character, very entertaining. But after watching Better Call Saul, he's a lot less likable than Jimmy is.
I almost respect the show more now with that lens because now I it's so weird because I know that like um the entire like hook of the show is like, oh, like we're taking a character and making him change from like
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chips to Scarface. But the more I watch it and the more like I consider it, it's like I don't really think it is that. I
He was
actually
always
think Tony
Scarface.
I almost think Tony changes more over the
Yeah.
course of The Sopranos. I think Walter is just he was always this guy, but he finally was given the freedom to just unleash it.
That
And
is
all
that
that
is what
resentment.
that is what the story is.
It's so weird how he's almost more of a static character in a way. It's just that he has the license to show the true sides of himself.
And
It's
again,
great.
I think I'm not trying to shit on Breaking Bad. I think where Breaking Bad succeeds is the narrative is so incredibly well paced, and like every scene contributes to this kind of realization about who Walt is in like
Mhm.
a perfect masterful way. I wouldn't cut one scene from Breaking Bad. I think every single one of them is an important part of the cinematic
Um,
experience of the show.
are you sure there isn't one scene that you would cut?
Which one are you talking about?
The happy birthday, Mr. President.
No, don't be one of those guys who's like, I hate people who are like, I couldn't watch the show after that cringe scene. Like, cringe is not that bad. People need to shut the fuck up about cringe. People watch the fucking Office and it's all cringe. Like, oh my god, people. It annoys me how much people are like, oh, I can't watch like in Camelot because of the cringe scene. Like, get over it, bitch. Like, it's a part of life. Cringe is a fucking part of life.
That was great. I just love how that's a meme. It sucks too because like it goes back to like the example of like it kind of sucks because I know there are actual guys like on YouTube who actually think this, but I love the memes where I'm like Walter poisons a child. Like it's like the Drake thing where Walter poisons a child and it's like I'm okay with that. But like Skylar sings Marilyn Monroe and they're like, no.
They
Like I love
genuinely
those.
feel this way, and it's so stupid. It's like, how can you have so little self-awareness to understand that like cringe doesn't fucking matter? Dumb bitches.
I didn't know you felt so strongly about that scene.
Well, no, I see it in comments all the fucking time. People are genuinely like, I can't watch In Camelot because of. I'm like, In Camelot's a great fucking, like, people say In Camelot is like one of the worst episodes of The Sopranos because of that scene, and I was like, you understand it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. They're doing what they set out to do,
Literally,
and
literally right
people don't
after that
understand that.
scene, literally right after that scene, doesn't Tony like leave and
He
it's
looks
like fucking
disgusted.
yeah.
Like, it's not. This is not like where the show is not self-aware enough to understand this. I hate when people say In Camelot's one of the worst episodes of Sopranos. This is a great episode, and
I
people are
think it
fucking stupid.
I think it really goes a lot. That's another episode when we're talking about toxic masculinity and about um the relationship and like how he viewed his father and
Oh
how
yeah,
he has like now he has these like conflicted relationships because he's like and it almost like makes you feel I don't want to say bad, but it gives you a new perspective for Livia where you're
oh
like
definitely.
yeah, you're like kind of and like it doesn't mean that you like her. You still think she's batshit insane. But at the same time you're like, well, I mean like in this environment, it's like how could you not go batshit? Look at Tony with
I
everything
have
you've
some
on your plate.
sympathy for Livia. Really, I do. After
Yeah.
that, when you see what Dickie or not Dickie, Johnny Boy put her through, like, yeah, she's a bad person, but so is Tony, and so is Carmela, and so is all these people. Like, she is a nuanced character as much as any of these guys are. And I think that's the magic of the show. I think that's what the point of that episode was to establish some sympathy for her, and people don't get that.
Absolutely. It's also funny. We'll wrap up soon, but funny enough, I keep going back because I'm so glad that you pointed this out. Um, you pointed out to me a couple. I think it was on our talk to masculinity, or maybe not, something else. But we're talking about Walter and about his family and how to kind of compare it to like Tony Soprano. Tony Soprano is a man who truly loves his children.
Yeah,
He is like he loves AJ. He loves Meadow. He fucking hates. He wants to slap the shit out of AJ a lot, but
we
he
all do.
does truly love them. But you said something, and it was so on, and it really goes into because a lot of people I saw in the comments of your video they were talking about it's like, well, you shouldn't use toxic masculinity. You should use ego instead. And I actually don't think the reason that isn't correct is because what you said about Walter's views of his family very specifically when he's talking about his family. And I've seen this with a lot of guys who were like very insecure about their own masculinity
Hmm.
and trying to like figure it out. They talk about family, like a wife and children, as almost like a concept. It's
Yeah,
almost like they aren't even like individuals.
yeah.
Have you ever seen? There's a clip. Have you ever seen Fences?
No, I've not
Um,
seen it. I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
the August Wilson play. There's a clip of it on with James Earl Jones. He played the main role, and there's a scene where he's basically like telling his son, where the son's like, "How come you never liked me? How come you're my father? How come you never liked me?" And he like lambasts him, saying, "It's like I don't have to like you. You're my son. You're my flesh and blood. All I have to do is like feed you and protect you. I don't have to like you."
Yeah,
And like that is the sort of that I think is definitely a concept of like this toxic masculinity of like you don't even view your family as like individuals.
yeah,
They're almost like props in your
yeah,
life. And that is exact because like if you actually look at like Walter's like, well, I have to set a good example for my son and my family. When did you ever even like spend all that much time? The only
no,
ever times you actually spent time with Walter Jr. was when you were trying to like spite Skylar, I think.
yeah,
Like, and now I'm thinking back, like very little. And maybe you could argue that's like a flaw of the writing, but I think
yeah,
it actually I think it does say something where like he got so offended when he started using a
yeah,
different name, and it's like, bro, you like when you that was another perfect example. When you stuck up for him in the pilot, you weren't really sticking up for him. You were
yeah.
kind of you were doing it for yourself, and I think that is a very big and why I think toxic masculinity in this context is the correct term, not just ego.
Yeah, I think it's very complicated. I mean, again, you can make argument that he loves his family, and I'm sure on some level he does. But like I talked about in that episode, I think it's more like my wife is there to reinforce my role as the patriarch
Hmm.
of the family. My son is there to kind of glorify me. And like you said with Fences, there is something to that in like life in general. Like it's not just to Walt. Like I think there is something where we essentially view a lot of our family as just kind of extensions of ourself and what they mean to us. And maybe
Hmm.
the same thing is true of like how we look at our parents, right? Do you really look at your parents as people, or are they just there as providers for you of like, when
That's a
am I
good
going to get
point.
my car? When am I going to get my allowance? When am I going to get my whatever? Of
I
course, you
think
have the justification of being a child and therefore are allowed to be selfish in a way that adults are kind of not supposed to be. But the family is a complicated like social concept in life, and I think we still kind of don't know exactly how we feel about members of our family, even though we quote unquote love them. You know, do we think of them as, you know, who they really are, or do we just think of them as family members?
that's an excellent point. I've always said I think one of the weirdest points of your life is when, and I don't know when the moment actually is. It could be when you're like 15, it could be when you're 30, it could be when you're 50. There is a moment where your perception of your parents shifts from your parent to an individual. Because again, like when you're a kid, I don't look at my mother as like Barbara. I look at my mother as my mom. She's my mom, and I still look at her like that. But once you get old enough, your relationship changes, the dynamic changes. You get a family of your own. You have your own responsibilities, and you start to realize that like, oh, this is just an individual. This person is my mother, but they are also an individual, and I think yeah. So with Walter, he does, and Tony does this too, but like not as much, ironically. With Walter, yeah, it's like he would talk about Walt Jr. and Skylar, but like in most cases when he's talking about them as like a concept, as like a structure, as like that defines who he is as opposed to individuals. And it kind of relates back to his sort of like egocentrism of where it's just like everything is about me. Even all these people who are super close to me, who I care about, it's all, even when I love them or even when I like care for them, it's all relating back somehow to how it serves me and who I am. Yeah.
There's a funny story. I My grandpa passed away recently. He actually passed the same week that Tony Sirico did. It was the Fourth of July week, and I was reflecting on the fact that when I first introduced my then girlfriend to I brought him over for Christmas, and she, you know, met the family. She was asking my grandparents all these questions like, "Oh, where are you from? Do you have any siblings? Whatever." And when they said the answers, I was like, I realized that I had never asked them any of these questions. Like, I had never asked my grandmother, did she have siblings or anything? Because to me, the idea of them was they're just my grandparents.
Yeah.
Their existence is like this kind of permanence that they just always existed as my grandparents. There's nothing that exists beyond their relationship to me. And I think again, you're right. That's one of the formative moments of your life when you realize that, oh, they all have their own story. You know, they didn't just exist to make me. That was a significant part of who they are. Just like when I have kids, I hopefully it'll be a significant part of my life. But you know, I have dreams, ambitions, loves, fears, hatreds that go much deeper than that, and of course, your parents do too. They're all individual people, and I think when we realize that about other people, we kind of grow as individuals. It's like it's not just about us. I think a lot of people treat everyone in the world again just as like extensions of themselves or reflections against themselves. That's why people argue so much. They're like, you're saying this just because you're going against what I believe in. It's like, no, they have their own life experiences of why they believe the things they do and why they do the things they do. And you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but you should try to understand why people feel the way they do. And I feel like if we all did that, we'd all be in a better place.
Absolutely. True maturity is realizing that Tony Soprano is a better person objectively than Walter White.
That was the lesson from all of this.
Yeah, not all like this deep exploration of family and familial dynamics and whatnot, and individualism and whatnot. It's all about media and Breaking Bad and Sopranos,
Well, that's what this channel is about.
which we kind of wrap back around to. We were talking about Little Mermaid for like 5 seconds, and then we got bored, and we're like, "Hang on, now we can shift it
The,
back."
the deeper message is fuck the Little Mermaid. That's
Pretty much.
that's what we were going for.
That's I just can't wait for all like I just can't wait for all like these dudes who like make like the YouTube rage videos, like them just like sitting on their couch and they're like And like their girlfriend or wife comes in, they're like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm watching the Little Mermaid." And it's like, "Why?" It's like, "Because I have to."
You're a grown ass fucking man getting mad about the Little Mermaid.
No hate watching. It's like, you're gonna, we know you're gonna do it. We're running a little bit long. That was
Yeah.
an excellent episode. We jumped around a lot,
Yeah.
but it was very formative, very interesting. I'm glad we got to touch on the Breaking Bad, because I'm gonna go through those comments right now on your video, and I won't respond,
You'll
even
have
though
fun.
I'm very tempted to. But well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. We'll be back with another one probably in the next week or so. I'm probably going to be discussing the mid-season. It's not. I keep saying mid-season finale, but like we're halfway through the first season of House of the Dragon. Me and Kino have some thoughts, so we will be relaying those to you next week. But for now, I am Mac.
I'm Kino.
And this is Kino. And we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
See ya.